What's up, Eager to Pleasers? Welcome back to another episode of the Eager to Please podcast. I'm so glad you're listening in because joining us is an extremely special and one-of-a-kind class act. Not only does this amazing person hold the title mom, she can also add CEO, clinical hypnotherapist, neurolinguistic practitioner, author, certified life and success coach, online marketing guru, and podcaster to her already impressive resume. I have the privilege of welcoming Olivia Dreizen Howell, co-founder of Fresh Starts Registry. Olivia, thank you so much for being here.
First of all, I just want to give you kudos for saying Dreizen correctly because nobody does that. So good job. I even leave, that's my maiden name, but I don't even use it much anymore because one of the benefits, I guess, of marrying somebody with a more simple last name is you don't have to pronounce it over and over again. So, good job, Natalie. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So excited that you're here. And I think I read too that you're from Huntington, New York.
I am from Huntington. Yeah.
Well, I am also from Huntington, but Huntington, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
With a T and not a D. So.
Yep. That's so funny. I have encountered a few people in my life that I'm like, I'm from Huntington. And they're like, I'm from Huntington. So yes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm from Long Island. Yep.
I do want to get into your personal journey and what prompted you to create the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again with your sister, Jenny. But before we get into that, I wanted to share with our listeners how the two of us got connected and hope that this is encouragement for everyone that when you want something, it's up to you to go after it. And sometimes cold calling, or in my case, sending an Instagram message does work. Not everyone ghosts you these days.
I love that.
So I'm very grateful that you're here and willing to be part of this conversation. And I know that when I reached out to you, I had said right off the bat, I believe that people are put on our path for a reason. Call it fate, divine intervention, whatever you want. In fact, my mom and I have this ongoing joke that people are listening to our conversations because she and I had just been talking about how I was doing now that I'm 2 years post-divorce. And I happened to be scrolling my Instagram feed and up pops this message that you had posted. And I wanted to share that with our listeners because I know there are so many people out there, both men and women, who have felt this way before about their lives. And it fits so perfectly with our theme this month of fairy tales and make-believe. And I think what caught my attention initially was that you said, I'm about to blow your mind. So let's dig into that and blow our listeners' minds just as much as you did mine. You had said you thought the plan was one marriage, one house, one forever. And when it ended, you whispered to yourself, I failed. But years later, you realize the marriage gave you children, wisdom, grit, and then released you into a life that actually fits. Maybe this wasn't off plan. Maybe the plan was this all along. What if divorce was actually the real plan and your marriage was just one step on the journey of your life? But wait, the plan said forever, but maybe forever was too small. What you have now is resilience, chosen family, late night laughter, kids who see your courage. That's bigger than forever. You thought the plan was a wedding. But maybe the real plan was divorce. The courage it sparked, the friendships it birthed, the new life it made possible. The wedding got you here, the divorce gets you free. The failure wasn't the divorce, and I get choked up.
By the way, I get choked up writing it and hearing it back, so I understand. Yeah.
The failure would have been staying, silencing yourself, disappearing inside a life that didn't fit. Leaving wasn't wrong. Leaving was survival. You told yourself this wasn't supposed to happen, but what if it was? What if every twist of the story, the vows, the undoing, the rebuilding, is exactly how you were meant to arrive here? Softer, wiser, freer. She thought she failed, but now she watches her kids thrive in 2 homes, both filled with love, both softer than the one that came before. Divorce wasn't the end of the family. It was the beginning of a better one. You thought the plan was one marriage, one home, one forever, but sometimes forever is 15 years. And maybe that was enough. Enough to give you children, wisdom, love, loss, and then freedom. The plan didn't fail. It simply finished. And that's okay. She thought she'd failed because her story didn't look like the stories in the movies. But the stories in the movies don't show a woman who leaves and learns to sleep deeply again, who discovered she can love her children more fully when she loves herself. Sometimes the best plan is the one that looks like no plan at all. You thought your life derailed. But what if it was never derailed, only redirected? The job you never would have taken, the town you never would have moved to, the friendships you never would have formed. Divorce wasn't a detour. It was the road you were meant to be on all along. Divorce wasn't supposed to be part of the plan. But what if the plan wasn't marriage? What if the plan was growth? What if the point was to love, to learn, to leave, to rebuild, to start fresh? Maybe the story isn't about failing the plan. Maybe the story is about finally living it. Obviously, I'm getting very emotional about reading that. Such a powerful, powerful message. So I wanted to let that soak in for a second and say that that was obviously the reason why I reached out to you in the first place. And by reading that, my mind was blown, and it totally changed my perspective on the whole divorce conversation. I never thought of divorce as a new beginning because I was seeing myself as a failure. And in fact, I didn't even want to talk about it. I was embarrassed. And, when I read that, I was like, okay, I've got to meet this woman. And how did she take something so personal, so emotional? Because clearly, just when you think you're over it, something comes back up, and here we are again, crying again. I want to shift the conversation back to you. How did your story start, and what prompted you to even write that post in the first place?
Oh, Natalie, you're so sweet. I have to say, out of all the writing I've done, that I think is my favorite. And it kind of came to me, that particular concept, right, of completely shifting. It's like taking the negative space and making it the story, right? Yeah, and that, I think about it all day, every day, right? And then if that's my life's mission, it is to flip the entire script and say to women, especially, you're bigger than this, right? I always say, I get a lot of people that argue with me on the internet about marriage and divorce. And I always say, we only believe divorce is a failure if we believe that marriage is the purpose of life. And we are so much more than a wife. That's not why we're here on this planet. And how can I look at my amazing kids and my career, which I love, and my warm, comfy bed and all of the things I have, and think this is a failure of a life, right? Like, the failure of a life was me literally on the kitchen floor begging my ancestors for help because I didn't know what to do. I wasn't going to survive that life. And, when you think about fairy tales and make believe, like, I look back at that girl and I'm like, that doesn't even feel like me, right? It's just like, it's totally different. So yeah, I was from a family of divorce. My whole family was divorced. So my parents got divorced when I was 10. All my grandparents were divorced. And so I grew up in it wasn't like weird. Like, it was just like, you have a million grandparents and your parents, do this. And it was just life. My parents' divorce was definitely traumatic for me because it was the 90s and things were handled differently then. But, I got through, and I actually ultimately, my mom met somebody who has been my stepdad for 30 years. And, we had a pretty normal, quote unquote, from the time I was 15, childhood. I went to college, and, I ended up teaching in my early 20s. And then I met the guy who I would marry online, and got married, did the whole country type wedding. That was in the early 2000s, and had my first son, and left teaching because it was too much for me to handle, teaching and parenting. And really, I was taking on the entire emotional load and domestic labor of the family.
Yes.
and on paper, Natalie, we were a good match, right? Like he was like you said, like you put things into the universe. He was like on paper, like half Jewish. We were raised kind of like same spiritual stuff. We both aren't big drinkers. He was a bluegrass musician, and like I grew up around bluegrass musicians, like weird stuff that was very similar. And again, like this is what the universe does. And this is what I always try to remind people. And I remember distinctly being pregnant with my first son. And there was a moment late at night one night when, and I loved him, right? I truly thought he was my soulmate, like 100%. And then one night I was sitting there it was dark in the living room, and I thought, I don't actually know if this is the marriage that I thought I was getting into. But you kind of hide that, right? You push it down. I was pregnant. Mm-hmm. I adored him. Like, how could I think anything? He was great to my family. Like, why would anything be wrong? So I started my own marketing firm, after, when I ended up leaving teaching, staying home with my son. So I'd work all day with my son. I was a work at home mom. My ex was an engineer, so he had typical hours, but when he came home, it was still me on duty, right? I did all the kid work. We ended up having a second son, and it was right around that time that things got really toxic. And so I will say I didn't know how toxic things were until after the marriage was over, as many women don't, because they're so in it, right? I could talk about emotional abuse for days and days. That's obviously one of the topics I talk about. But for those who haven't experienced it, it's so insidious and slow, and it's really hard to know what's happening. And so between working nonstop, raising two little kids, my grandmother, who was like my person, was at the end of her life. It was devastating for me. I was spinning in circles, and I had a partner who would come home and sit on the couch. And I was like, hello. And it's not like I wouldn't ask, like, and I remember just like feeling like the image in my mind was like a plane going down. Like, this is the life. Like, and, I kept thinking to myself, okay, well, I love him, right? Like, I love him, right? And like, it would be quiet. Like in the shower, I'd have like a moment where I'd be like, okay, well, you're in your early 30s, stick it out for a little longer, see what happens, right? And then, my younger son was about maybe 1.5, 2, and things just started to get really not great. And I remember thinking to myself, you are going to very easily become one of those women who are screaming in a Target at her husband and is perceived as the crazy one on the news. And I'm not the crazy one, right? And so I've had disordered eating my whole life, and my binge eating was like so bad. And so I was like, I need to do something. I'm going to die. Like, this is not healthy. Right. So, I actually connected, this is a very odd story, but connected with somebody on Instagram who was a therapist coach in Colorado, and I'm in New York. And we became friends. Her daughter was about the same age as my son. And so we became friendly on Instagram, where most of my relationships start with people, obviously. And she said I was working, I was running a full-time not six-figure at the time, but a full-time marketing agency. We were doing social media. I built this up from nothing. And it was me. I was doing everything. I was doing small businesses, global brands. I just built it up. I was making probably at that time $40,000 a year, but I started with nothing. My background it's in Latin. It's not in marketing. Wow. Yeah. I was a classical studies major. That was my degree, was in classical studies. And so I didn't have money because, and this is the part of the financial abuse people don't understand. My ex was making 6 figures. He paid the mortgage. Full stop. So right. Everything for the kids I paid for, clothes, medicine. I paid for all the food in the house. So I had very little money. And so I reached out to this therapist, and she said to me, I will give you therapy, coaching, we called it. If you will write, I'm a writer. She said, if you wouldn't mind writing about your experience with coaching, for free. And I was like, bingo, done. Like, I'm happy to write about this, which my ex was not thrilled about, because I definitely said some, I wrote not about him, but there was like little things. Like, I remember I wrote a piece about how he was it wasn't even about, it was nothing negative. I said something like how he was texting me from work, and my ex-mother-in-law called him and was like, well, now your boss is going to get worried that you're texting people from work, which is a whole other story. And so I started therapy in March of 2019. My marriage was over a month later.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it was a combination of a few things. One is that my therapist said to me, what are you afraid of? Right? What's the worst? What's the biggest fear? And I said, of being a single mom. And she said, you already are. You already are a single mom. And I was like, yep, point made. And then there was just a lot of toxicity and gaslighting, like a lot of gaslighting. Like I remember I always joke, it's like, it reminds me of if you've ever seen Father of the Bride Part 2, when they get pregnant, and there's a great scene with Diane Keaton and Steve Martin, and they're driving home and she wants the baby and he doesn't. And he's looking on his side of the street and it's like screaming children. And on her side of the street, it's like the happiest little kids skipping with their parents. And I remember we went to a children's museum with my kids, and I was like, this is great. They're so happy. And then on the train home, he was like, God, that was like not a fun day. And I was like, huh, interesting. And so, I always say some marriages, and every marriage ends in a different way. And sure. For me, it was really one moment that changed everything. There was a couple of things that happened with my older son, who was about 5 at the time. And it was one of those moments you look at and you're like, that's not what I wanted for my life. This is not okay. Mm-hmm. And I kind of internalized it. And then my grandmother had passed away at this point. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and it was almost like somebody was pushing me, like, you need to get up. And I just started crying, and I couldn't stop crying. And I put my grandmother's flannel on, and I sat in the living room, and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do? Right. And the son came up, and he came over to me and he said, what's the matter? And I said, I think we need to go to couples therapy. And he said, no, I think we're fine. And I was like, really? Wow. And then that kind of escalated. Within that couple hours, it escalated. And he, and I was not I'm not like a mean fighter. I'm not like a person that like says mean things to people when we fight. I can get loud, but I'm not going to be like, you're whatever. And I remember like we were really going at it, screaming at each other, which we never did. The kids, like my kids still, that was a very traumatic moment for them. Like they remember that still. And he left for work, and I called my sister, and she was living, in Queens, which is like an hour away. I called my sister and I said, I kind of think my marriage is over. And she was like, what? And I was like, we just had this really wild fight. And like, he kind of said he's a musician, and that was like his goal in life. And he kind of said like, it's that or nothing. If you can't follow my dreams, which is hysterical, because that's all I had been doing, is like following his dreams. Mm-hmm. And of course my son heard all of this, and he still, he remembers like these conversations. And, my sister drove. So thankfully the babysitter came. Babysitters are angels. And, I went to Target, which is where all sad moms go, and called my sister, and she was driving out to meet me. By the time she came to my house, we were like, okay, I think we need to like, this is it. Like we need to call it. Like the marriage is, how can I keep, like, I can't go back, but I still wanted to see, I didn't want to like give up quite yet. And so my ex and I were texting during the day, and I said, I'm going to find a couples counselor. We're going to go to, a therapy session. And the funny part of the story is that even though my parents are divorced, my parents have been divorced since I was 10, they're almost 30 years. I'm still very close to both my parents. And, that's great. I called them that morning, and I said, something's going on, like with my marriage. Like, I don't know what to do. And they had the same exact response, which was, you need to go to therapy together. Okay. He called his parents. This is my favorite story. He called his parents, and their response, they were still married, was come home. And so, that is precisely what he did. He ended up calling me in the middle of the day, and he said, basically like, my parents want us to know, like, if they're going to retire to North Carolina, would we retire there with them? And I was like, no, what? I was like, and I was like, what is happening? I literally felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. I was like, what? And so, he came home that night and we were on a Whole30 together. And I always remember this because I was making dinner for us and I was in the kitchen and he had a music studio that was off the kitchen. It was one of the reasons we bought the house. And to his credit, he's an amazing musician. He's been a professional musician for many, many years and fantastic musician, which is one of the reasons I fell in love with him. But I remember he kind of came home. We didn't say anything to each other. He was up in his studio playing guitar. And he kind of looked at me and I was down cooking and he looked at me and he said, do you think maybe we should talk about stuff? And I said, what do you want to say? And he said, and I'll never forget it. He said, I think I should leave. And I said, leave where? And he said, I think I should leave. I think we're, I said like a divorce. And he goes, yeah. And I knew whatever I said in that moment was going to dictate the rest of my life. And so I took a beat. And I almost could see the clouds, like, the sun coming out. And I thought, right. And I thought, and I said to him, like, yeah, I think that's best for us. We love each other so much that it's time for us to part. We got married so young. And the funny part is at that exact moment, one of my best friends texted me. Of course, nobody knew what was going on. She just texted me because we talked all day. And she goes, hey, what's going on? And I pick up my phone. I look at it and I said, my husband's leaving, literally, because he just said that. And she goes, where? To like get groceries? And I was like, no, I think he's like leaving. And she was like, what the fuck is happening? Right?
Oh my gosh.
That's wild. It was wild. Like it was really wild. But it was like, sometimes when I doubt myself in life, I think back to that moment and I'm like, if that could happen, and I never thought I would get out of that marriage, and I prayed to get out of that marriage, that anything's possible. That was a miracle of miracles. And so we ended up, long story short, living together for the summer while I helped him find a new place. He ended up moving to Chicago where his family is from. And he remarried and, had another kid, and I wish him nothing but the best because he gave me the best present, which is my kids and my freedom. And, the divorce is a whole other story. We got divorced during the pandemic, which was a whole other story. But ultimately, long story short, the way that kind of the whole company was founded was that when he moved out in August of 2019, my sister had just gotten engaged to her longtime partner 2 weeks before my marriage ended. So she had been with her partner for almost 10 years. He was like part of the family, right? Wow. Like he was like uncle, like all these things. So they had come over right when my ex moved out and they installed a security system. They helped me clean out the house. I mean, when you talk about like depressive house, like it was like the walls were crying, like it was not a good place. The energy was bad. And so they helped me clean out. We did everything and they left. And I remember thinking like half the rooms are empty. The other half of the stuff here has his DNA on it. I don't want the towels and the sheets, right? Like, why is there not a registry for this? Like, this is when I need the support, right? Like, people are asking me, what can we do? How can we help you? And so I Googled it. I was like, there's got to be like a divorce registry, breakup registry. And there wasn't. And the only thing that there was articles saying, why is there not a divorce registry? And I'm pretty intuitive and I can kind of tell when my body's telling me to like do something. And so I wrote in my journal, I want to start Fresh Starts Registry, which is the one-stop shop to begin again. It just kind of came out. And, I said, I want to have these bundles of items that you can go add to your registry to eliminate the overwhelm. This is such an overwhelming time. And honestly, I was so thrown by the divorce in a way that I didn't think I would be because I'd lived with it my whole life. I thought, well, it's divorce, right? You do it, it's paperwork. There were some things that literally took me off my feet, like, in the divorce papers and stuff like that. And so, I called my sister and I said, we've always wanted to work together. And I said, let's start this company. And she was like, I love it, but like, we don't know how to do a startup. She was on the road. She worked for tech events. She was like, I'm gone half the year. Like, how would we do this? So then she was supposed to get married, May of 2020. And her wedding was obviously canceled because of the pandemic. And so they had moved the wedding, and I always feel bad because she's the middle child, and so she was like really excited and having this big wedding at like this huge estate here on Long Island, and she was so excited. She moved the wedding and moved the wedding and moved the wedding, and then he decided that he didn't love her anymore.
Oh my word.
So she had the opposite experience of me. She left her apartment with nothing, and I stayed at the marital residence. So she moved back to Long Island. She rented this really sweet little apartment in an old house, and she called me and she was like, remember that idea you had? She's like, let's do it. And that was like, I don't know, May of 2021. And by August, we were up and running, and we were on the Today Show by February. Because the idea was so wild to people. And for us, it's about so much more than just like obviously the registry. We do so much more, but this is a movement, right? Like you said, Natalie, this is a whole mindset shift that we are hammering over people's heads, right? Because it's time. The divorce is not a failure, and it's time to really think about it as the beginning of your life, not the end of your life. And so we have been doing this for 4 years. It is the blessing of my life. I love this so much.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you. We have obviously the registry side, so you can go build a registry for free, and it's on Amazon and my registry, so you can go add anything you want. We tell you how to send it out to people, the scripts you can use. Like, we really take a very, very trauma-informed approach to every single thing we do. And then we have our amazing experts. So we don't ever charge anybody who is going through a divorce for anything. You can come browse the experts, get our resources. We have 3 free ebooks and more coming. The way we make money is the way we've always made money, which is from marketing. And so we have an expert guide with over 150 experts, and they pay a monthly fee, just like any Psychology Today model. And then we provide them with direct referrals and networking. And depending on your membership level, things like business coaching and press and media opportunities. So it's a beautiful ecosystem. And I started in January of this year meeting one-on-one with women and men for free consultations when they're going through a divorce or considering divorce. And it has been, I mean, truly like just so amazing to talk to all these people and to be able to be like, I have support for you. I have these things. And we approach it just completely differently than any other divorce platform. Right. Yeah. Right. And so like, just as an example, like if you were coming on a call with me, Natalie, and you're like, a lot of people are nervous, right, to talk to me. I'm the first person that they're going to say that they're getting divorced. And I always come on and I go, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. I'm so happy to see you. Right. This is exciting. Like, this is the fresh start. Like, this is not like, I'm so sorry you're getting divorced. Let me help you find a lawyer, right? We're not old school. We're not we're not suits, right? We're like, we come in with our sweatpants and our sweatshirts and we're like, what do you need, right? This is fun. And so divorce is hard, right? It's going to be hard. And we're not glamorizing it. We're not saying it's going to be easy. We're saying we are here to support you through this. It doesn't have to be as traumatic. It's going to be something, because any legal battle is not fun, right? But you can be supported. Your children can be supported, and you can get through this. And, the messaging we put out, the way that we interact with people is unlike anything else any other divorce platform has ever done. So we're just really proud of what we do. And I appreciate that someone like you understands and that it helped you, because that's why I did all this. So, yeah.
Totally. And I love everything you just said and want to unpack so much of that, because divorce is such an emotional and personal experience. And I mean, it's not like you're going to a friend and asking for recommendations like, hey, you got a good restaurant or a good hairstylist, or how about a good divorce attorney? Because usually it's a one and done event. And you and Jenny have done such a phenomenal job of kind of putting all of this together in one spot. You have resources available, you've got experts available, you have, one-on-one coaching with you or Jenny or whomever. So I think it's, especially for people who don't even know where to start. I mean, it's the last thing on your mind.
Well, that's the thing, Natalie. And I took myself as, I think because Jenny and I don't come from a legal background, and we don't come from, in that way, like a startup background. We came at this all new, right? And so I was my own like avatar for this, right? And so I thought, well, what am I up in the middle of the night Googling? What am I afraid to do? Something we're doing right now, we're building out, with the help of our experts, this whole series called the Survival Series, that what the fuck do you do in that moment when you go to open your house and your spouse has changed the locks?
Oh my gosh.
Right? Nobody tells you. Like, nobody tells you what to do, right? What do you feel like? And these are all real scenarios that I've heard from people, right? What do you do if you go pay for diapers and your bank account is drained because your spouse drained the bank account or moved all the money? And so we're working with our experts to literally build out blogs and social content that are like, here's what you do in that moment. Save this post. Like, these are all the things, because we're not prepared for all of this, right? And so, we always say, like, our bigger mission is to eliminate the overwhelm, right? And we really like to bridge the gap between the people who need support and the people who want to support. There are a lot of people that really want to support the people that they love going through a divorce, and they don't know how, right? And so maybe it's, going to the registry and getting them a shower curtain, or maybe it's Googling a very weird legal phrase for them, or there's a million things you could do, paid or not paid, right? But, divorce happens. It happens a lot. It happens about every minute in America. And it's silly for us at this point to like think of it as this like stigmatic, it's the shameful scarlet letter thing. It's happening, guys. Like, get used to it. So
true. Yeah. It's so true. In fact, I just said this the other day to a friend. I was actually a guest on a friend's podcast saying the same thing. I felt so ashamed, like I was wearing the scarlet letter or a big D, and not because I had a big bra size. It's because, like I just went through a divorce a couple years ago, and I just felt so about the whole thing. You talk two directions I kind of want to go in, and you choose one you want to talk about first. The emotional load, because I feel like my story is very similar to yours in ways. Carrying the emotional load, being the stay-at-home mom, not feeling like you're supported, even though your spouse is like, well, I am supporting. I'm going and getting the paycheck. I'm supporting you financially. But it's so much more. And I know that you and I have a mutual friend, Gemma Hartley, which I adore. Her book set up just kind of like opened my eyes to all of this too. That, they don't get it, that it's so much more than just the paycheck that comes in. What about the support? What about helping with dinners or picking up groceries or, I don't know, a gallon of milk? I remember having a conversation with my ex-husband, and later on, because we did go through therapy and try all the stuff before we finally said, this is just not working. And he's like, I didn't realize, and I feel bad that I said, God, why couldn't you just get the gallon of milk? I'm like, well, because I have to cart 3 kids to the grocery store because I forgot it on my list. I'm so sorry. Meanwhile, you're coming past a grocery store on the way home. Can you please just stop and pick up a gallon of milk? And he would bitch about it because he's tired. He just worked a full day. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about working a full day, because I don't ever have an hour off. So, without getting into the big pissing match here, I totally feel where you're coming from with the emotional load. And it just got to the point where, I'm like, we can do this together miserably, or we can do this separately and be happy. And I know you have coined some pretty creative phrases for messaging, like married single mom. I have a song that in my list that I want to write someday called Married But Single, because, we're married on paper. Like you said, everything looks great on paper or in front of people, but like, I'm feeling miserable. You're feeling miserable. This is not a marriage. Some other things that you had talked about, I'd love to get some deep dive into this, like the separation shift and the shadow cohabitation. How did you come up with those?
Thank you. First of all, thank you. Well, married single mom, I didn't come up with, but I will say with married single mom, it's been around, floating around for a while, but it gets a lot of negative feedback from people, I think, and a lot of like laughter. And I'm trying to like I'm an educator at heart. So I'm trying to get people to understand, like, this actually is a thing. I was a married single mom, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like, we don't talk about the partnership, quote unquote, right? Where one person comes home and sits on the couch and then sits on the couch, and then you give them dinner and then they sit on the couch, right? That's not a marriage, right? And so, I think that's a whole other topic, obviously, because I also firmly believe a lot of those marriages, myself included, it starts long before the kids come. Right.
Oh, for sure.
And
yes.
so there's, and I was a people pleaser, a lot of this oldest daughter kind of thing. So that's a whole other topic. Separation Shift honestly, I'm very proud of Separation Shift. That was something so I remember buying I love sociology. I minored in at college. And I remember right after my first son was born buying, Arlie Hochschild's Second Shift book. And I was like, what is, because I didn't understand. I was like, what is happening? I'm coming home from teaching all day, and then I'm making dinner, cleaning, doing the dishes, doing the laundry, putting the baby bath, bed, all these things. And I'm like, and I'm still working all day, and he's working and then done. Like, what's happening? And so when I went through my divorce and the more I talked to people, I realized that the domestic labor obviously doesn't change. And I joke, like, even during my divorce, I helped him find an apartment. I scheduled the moving people. I did all the paperwork for the divorce. I found everything. And so the separation shift is that third shift of the divorce, that it doesn't stop. And it doesn't stop really for most women, until your kids are 18 or older, because,
or your husband's case, like his mom just calls him home, like, I'll take care of you.
Right. And so, well, that's a whole other conversation, Natalie, but yeah. And so, I think that, we don't talk about, the domestic equity of divorce. And I'm a big fan of Eve Rodsky's, and we're going to do some stuff together because I cold reached out to her, that she was my person. Awesome. And I was like, you need to talk to me. And she actually came across my writing and was like, I don't know who this person is, but I really like her stuff. And I was like, it's me, and you need to talk to me. And so, her fair play work, we need to bring fair play into divorce because there is domestic inequity in divorce. My dear friend Laura Danger has a book coming out called No More Mediocre, which goes into this. If you haven't read her stuff, she's amazing. You would love it. And she talks a lot about the cultural impacts in sitcoms and society and all of these things that really mess up our real relationships. And so separation shift is real, the domestic labor and I think because I was a very independent child and it was a different time, my parents had that separation shift, but not in the same way. And so now, right, parenting is very different. And so it's like you're packing the bag to go to your dad's house and you're making sure that the kids have all their forms and the schedules. And so the labor doesn't stop. And then the shadow cohabitation. Again, people give me weird feedback on this too, but people don't read. That's the problem. They don't read and like, slow down. This is not, a lot of what I'm talking about is not new. I'm just putting a name on it, right?
Label on it, exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so shadow cohabitation is actually incredibly common. And what that means is that there's an intentional choice to cohabitate when you're separated for a short period of time because it's better for for your economic ecosystem or typically it's an economic choice, not as much for the children. But, for example, like my ex we lived together for 4 months because he had nowhere to go. He was still working on Long Island, I wasn't going to move out. That was our house. And so most people who are not in severely abusive relationships, and even then, often have to live together after you separate. Because what do you think happens? Like, sometimes people don't think this through. It's like you decide to divorce, and then what? Where do you think you go to bed that night? So it's like, exactly. So it's just that intentional decision to kind of lead your own life. This is not anything that's been not happening. It's for generations and generations of divorce, right? Yeah. And you're just deciding, I'm going to sleep in my music studio and you get the bedroom. And, for more equitable couples, right? They both help with the children and things like that. I mean, when we were going through it, he was buying his own food, which is a wake up call for him. I mean, I remember right after we decided to separate and he was texting me, what's for dinner tonight? And I was like, no, dude, this is not how this works. Sorry. I
shook my head because my ex and I did the same thing for about a month. We were divorced in June. And because I was the one moving out, I had to find a place. I had to go back to work full time and just to get myself set so I could actually take care of my kids financially,
Which is interesting, Natalie, because you were a stay-at-home mom, right?
I did some consulting on the side, but it was very part-time. But again, going from part-time to full-time work I'm just like, oh my gosh, I felt the guilt. I felt all the stuff because my kids were so used to me just being available.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, this is another layer of being a responsible parent. I got to make sure I can pay my mortgage every month.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk to a lot of stay-at-home moms who end up being the ones who move out. And that was something I wanted to address while we were building Fresh Starts, is that often it is the mom that leaves and downsizes to an apartment. And these are, a lot of women are downsizing from big houses. And so we wanted to make sure that they had the necessities they needed for their new place. I mean, when we say divorce registries save lives, they really do save lives. They allow for women to think, okay, I might have to find a smaller place, but I'm going to have a registry and know that I'll get, plates and cups and bowls from the people who love me. Traditionally, and I say traditionally, it's not been around for very long, but people have, said like, here's a bottle of wine if you get divorced or whatever. I don't drink. I'd rather eat. And so for me, like that didn't, and thank you to the friends that did that, but I'd rather you spend the $16 on, something I really needed for the house. And so, I think that like so much of what I like to do in my writing, as you see, is just shining a light on this stuff, right? And saying like, this is happening. Since the time I was a kid, I was obsessed with families and family structures and what's happening behind people's doors and under their roofs. And, then to say like, well, this is happening in my household. It's happening in probably other people's households. And if you look at the comment sections on my Instagram, that's pretty much what most people are saying is like, I didn't know this was happening in other people's households, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I just want people to feel like. That's the community that we're building. Like we're all in this together. You're not crazy for thinking that your marriage is toxic because, you're being told you're stupid and fat, like these are not normal things. And so, I just want people to talk about it and for them to know that they're not alone. If I could just help know that one person feels less alone because of something that we've done, that's the whole point of all of this.
I love it. You were a pioneer before you even knew it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing. So we're in September, and I think I had read somewhere that I don't know where the statistics come from that September is divorce season. Do you know why that is?
Yeah, September. So there's a couple of seasons, and I have my own theories about this too, but September is a big one because after the summer, there's a couple of things that happen. One is that a lot of moms do all the work in the summer when the kids are home. And they're often working and it's exhausting. And then they look back on their summer and go, everybody else had a good summer except me. What was that about? Right. And then there's also a lot more family time in summer. And so it's a lot more time for issues to come up. And then what happens often is, so statistically speaking, women contemplate divorce for 2 years before they even mention it to anyone. So it's a long time. Yep. And
or
so,
even more.
Right. Even more. And so, often what happens is they will finally be done like in July, let's say, and be like, I can't do this anymore. But you're not going to, what are you going to do? Like file for divorce when the kids are home in summer? So as soon as the kids go back to school, a lot of divorce lawyers get the call. And it's interesting. And what's really interesting is that I've worked with women who, let's say I met with them in January, and they're contemplating divorce, and I connect them directly to our experts, and I'll say, here's a mediator, here's a divorce coach. Sometimes this just happened the other day. I will get an email from somebody I met with in January, and they'll be like, I'm finally ready. It's September, right? And so that it takes a long time.
It does. And to get yourself prepared, like in my case, we waited until the girls were out of school in May and then told them right at the end of May because Tennessee gets out,
right
before Memorial Day. But we didn't want to disrupt the schedule and the flow and all the stuff. But it took me a while to figure out a job, and start looking for houses and all the stuff and to make sure I could afford a house, with what I was going to be getting out of the divorce. So, all the stuff. It does time and it's not just like you said, not one of those things like, okay, I'm waking up tomorrow and deciding.
No, and that's why I think it's ridiculous when people are like, well, we've heard like, don't glamorize it by celebrating divorce. And I always say, I'm not celebrating divorce. I'm celebrating the decision that you made that was really hard. And I'm celebrating your survival because what is it? We only celebrate when a baby showers for the baby, a wedding showers for the couple. You don't get anything when you're restarting your life again. Like, why are we, and well, a lot of that goes back to patriarchy and stuff, but why Why are we not celebrating that? And also with the economy and the housing market right now, people are waiting to get divorced because you can't afford two lifestyles, two homes, right? On this, what's happening right now. So, we just want to normalize it. I always say the best thing we can do for divorce is make it boring, right? Oh, they're getting divorced. Who cares? Right. And like, that's my mission in life. Let's make it so boring that nobody cares anymore.
Oh my gosh. So much good stuff. And I know you have so much more ahead of you. Olivia, thank you for joining us. I do want to be respectful of your time, but I always ask my guests at the very end, if there's any other pieces of advice that we haven't talked about that you want people to know about you or the company or services that you offer, anything that would be helpful to our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, I respond to every DM that I get, as Natalie knows.
I attest to that. Yes.
And so I really do. I check my other box. And so if you are going through this, if you have a question, if you need a resource, please send me a message at Olivia Howell. We have amazing experts, and our experts have so many free resources. I mean, so many. We have free divorce support groups. We have webinars, workshops. You can just shoot me a DM and just say, can you send me the free, resources? I will send it. If you want to do a one-on-one call, I have a calendar. It's totally free. There's no upsell. I literally am just there to see what's going on and how we can educate you and empower you. We have our 3 free ebooks, and one of them is How to Get Divorced as a Stay-at-Home Parent, which is a book I'm incredibly proud of. And, it's really for all parents. Like which eventually we'll do one for all parents too, probably just very similar. It has everything you need. The scripts for talking to your partner about divorce, how to budget, how to file for divorce. It literally is 150 pages. It takes you through the whole process. And if you need more help, we're here. And most of our experts have free consultations. You do not need to feel alone in this process if we're here, and we're here for everything.
So grateful. I love it.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Olivia, for joining us. I will make sure to post all of your socials and links to your website so people know how to get in touch with you.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks so much.